Pierre, should I start?
Yes, in 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yes, GC, you start.
Now, dear participants from all over the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the high-level session of the Innovative Dialogue on Advancing the Early Childhood Agenda, high-level session towards a global partnership strategy organized under the leadership of Her Royal Highness Princess Laurentine of the Netherlands and the UNESCO Assistant Director General for Education, Stefania Giannini. My name is Gwangcheol Chung, Chief of Education Policy Section at UNESCO, and I'm honored to be the timekeeper, a difficult task, and also introduce speakers of this high-level dialogue, which follows the technical session held on the 16th of December last year. Please note that this dialogue, attended by eminent personalities, ministers responsible for and representing all regions, and the high-level representatives of international organizations, is broadcast live through YouTube and recorded for wider dissemination later. As you have seen in the agenda, the main sessions of which are currently displayed on the screen, the dialogue is meant to be interactive and participatory, combining a mix of plenary sessions and parallel sessions, Q&A sessions, both in writing and oral interventions. Without further delay, may I kindly invite Ms. Stefania Giannini, Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO, for her welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, GC. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Your Highness Princess Laurentine of the Netherlands, all the guests, excellencies, ministers, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce briefly this important meeting, and thank you, really thank you for joining today. It's really wonderful to see words leading early childhood advocates gathered with ministers and senior national representatives at a very special time, at this very special moment in history, I should say. We are here to better respond to a crisis hitting the world's youngest children with the ambition to chart out a global partnership strategy. The scale of the pandemic, we know, we repeated many times, and its impact on education at all levels across the world oblige us to collaborate more strategically. It's an unprecedented situation, and we never saw in history schools from pre-primary to university level shut down because of something which happened in the world. The foundations of learning and lifelong development are set in the earliest years. This is something that neurosciences clearly demonstrate. We have evidence of that, and we are working on how we can better address this challenge. The evidence on the impact of early learning programs has accumulated over the past decade to form a kind of watertight investment case. But political will is not matching up. It must be very clear. The Sustainable Development Goal in education already recognizes the importance of the earliest year with a dedicated target, 4.2 for experts and people who are, as we are, in education. The delivery of childhood services has been severely affected by this crisis. The younger the age, the more difficult to pivot any kind of remote learning. Early childhood services in preschool offer not only a place to be, but the first spaces for socialization and providing social protection, primary health care, nutrition. They are a lifeline for the most vulnerable young children. According to UNESCO monitoring and data, at least 35 million children at the pre-primary level are still affected by the closure of national programs and schools. And the longer they last, the more dramatic the impact on development of young children. We are talking here about the life chances and potential. We estimate that enrollments at this level could decline by nearly 3%, affecting a minimum of 5 million children. And this is then a big emergency, requiring new strategies to attract more sustained attention to childhood care and education in the policy agendas of all countries in the world. This has been our overarching response to the pandemic: learn, partner, and act together. We are working with multilateral and bilateral partners to strengthen and streamline global cooperation in education, and we must influence financing decisions, because early childhood support is one of the most powerful investments to combat inequality and poverty early on, and to give children a strong start in school and life. Beginning in July 2020, last year, UNESCO, together with partners, launched a process for developing a global partnership strategy for early childhood through an innovative dialogue galvanized by Her Highness Princess Laurentina. I wish to thank once again for the engagement and providing a new methodological approach. This dialogue aims to identify key strategies to support countries, enhance interagency coordination, and scale up international cooperation and solidarity, bringing together our respective strengths. This dialogue has already identified 5 strategies for results that will inform our discussion today. Let me briefly outline a few key considerations for successful adoption and implementation of the strategy itself. First, the importance of rights-based normative approach. According to a new UNESCO study on the right to pre-primary education that we issue today, the legal provisions for free and compulsory pre-primary education are lacking in 2/3 of the worst countries. Our partnership strategy will aim to strengthen normative frameworks as a key step to ensure the right pre-primary education with a lifelong learning perspective, including during times of emergencies and crisis. Our mission is universality. The second dimension that our partnership can move to the needle on is data. Effective policy require more refined measures of child development, encompassing indicators on learning, health, nutrition, sanitation, and child rights and protection. The third dimension that we must galvanize around is training, supporting to educators and teachers, the most influential factor in these very early years. Finally, cross-sectoral collaboration is essential. And I'm very pleased today that we have Dr. Susanna Jakob, Deputy Director General of WHO, with us at such a critical time. Our meeting today is a political institutional way to put forward the GPAs. And political support and policy support and ownership, peer learning, evidence, clear targets, and strong advocacy will drive our action in the coming months and years. As the lead agency for SDG 4, UNESCO will be fully engaged in supporting this partnership and better positioning ECCE, early child education, care and education, in line with its coordination role and in the context of our common collective efforts to strengthen the steering of Education 2030 framework for action. Children cannot wait, so let's unite to protect their future. I thank you very much, all of you. I look forward to our meeting today.
Thank you, Ms. Giannini, for providing us the broader picture and situating today's dialogue in this broad context. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Boren Shaprun, Director of Division of Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems at UNESCO, to introduce the first session of today's dialogue, for setting the scene and guiding us on the process of the Global Partnership Strategy for Early Childhood and also the expectations from today's meeting, together with Princess Laurentine and Emily Vargas Baron, Chair of the Strategy Drafting Group. Boren?
Thank you, Guangchol, and good afternoon to all the participants. Good afternoon to the Princess Laurentine. Very pleased to see you. Thank you to Madame Giannini, ADG. I would like to remind that this meeting is a very important meeting, but it's part of a process that we started a few months ago, with a very inclusive and participatory process of engaging with the national stakeholders, with government, but also with the international organization that have been fully involved in preparing the draft strategy that we will be discussing today. But that this meeting today is part of the process, and we are expecting feedback, we are expecting engagement, but we would like also to hear from ministers, from the head of agencies, how they see their contribution to advancing this strategy that is a global strategy that involves everybody. It's very important also to highlight that the document that we shared with you has been the fruit of a collaboration across many agencies and member states, different geographies, different income countries and income levels countries. So it is deemed to be a universal document that covers different contexts and different needs and concerns. Maybe 3 points that I would like to highlight before passing the floor to Emily and other colleagues. The first one is that this is a strategy to be implemented. And that means that we are not only looking at the objective, but we are also looking at what will be the mechanism, what are the means to ensure that it is implemented. The second, that this is a strategy that is mission driven. And that means that we are not having a generic objective, but we would like to work further on what are the missions that we need to design to make it happen. What are the flagship programs that will make this strategy objective and results happen and that will yield result. The third, that our strategy on early child education and early child care is framed within a lifelong learning perspective, and that the work that we are discussing has to be discussed within the global SDG 4, within the global also education architecture that UNESCO is entrusted to look at and to improve the steering and the capacity to link policies, financing, and data monitoring and evaluation. So our discussion today has to be framed within this broader perspective that Madame Giannini referred to earlier. Maybe to finish is that we are expecting feedback and reaction on the key pillars and the different areas, but we would like to hear how we move forward, what next, how we can ensure that what we'll be discussing today, potentially endorsing, how we can take it forward in terms of the implementation. Thank you very much, Guangchol.
Okay, then can I kindly invite Emily Vargas Baron on the process that we have gone through to prepare the draft strategy?
Thank you very much, Guangchol. It has been an enormous pleasure and a tremendous amount of work to work on the Global Partnership Strategy. You will recall our meeting of December 16th was filled with rich ideas. We gleaned lists and lists of wonderful suggestions from around the world. We had entered that meeting with 3 major strategies. We came out with 5. And then UNESCO formed 5 teams, excellent specialists and people who have been deeply involved in early childhood development around the world. They were very dedicated in their work and were clearly aware of the needs in the world, of the tremendous urgency of our task. So we all worked very hard. Countless hours, countless days were spent by many people working late into the night to provide elements for our strategy. The results are very striking. We have a 25-page paper, which is in draft form, of course, for improvement. And we have an executive summary of around 7 pages with the key points of the strategy there. We have shared them widely with our participants today, especially from our countries. We hope for a very rich dialogue today, and we look forward to hearing your ideas. We are especially wanting to hear the ideas and suggestions for both content and for the implementation from the countries who are here present. Our Assistant Director General Giannini presented the 5 strategies. I'll go through simply the wording very quickly. Harness evidence for action and rights. Leverage data, monitoring and evaluation for accountability, something all countries need tremendously. Scale up access, inclusion, equity, and quality. 4th is strengthen policy, governance, financing, and advocacy. And then the 5th is galvanize coordination and international cooperation. So today we look forward to your ideas. We really hope that you will give us the best concerns or the major concerns that you have in your countries and the areas that you would like to have us emphasize. We want to thank you for giving your time and your support for this Global Partnership Initiative. We know that it is a very challenging time for everyone, and that you take this time today is something that we are most grateful for. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. Now, can I kindly invite Princess Laurentine to provide some guidance on why you are here, about the outcomes and approach of today's dialogue. Princess Laurentine?
Yes, thank you, Guangzhou, and thank you to everyone, excellencies, friends, and colleagues from UNESCO. I think Borhan and Emily and Stefania already put into really good words why this is urgent, and I think you all know why this is urgent, so I won't go into detail about that. I am grateful that UNESCO has picked up the ball so focused manner on ECCE in this crisis situation. And if there's one word or 2 words that I would really like to highlight constantly, which requires of all of us a different type of engagement today as well, is that we are so keen. That's what you hear Stefania and Borhan and Emily say. We don't want this to be a paper strategy. We want action, and in every country around the world. And so we're all co-owners of this strategy. And that's indeed what today is all about. It's about real dialogue on concrete priorities and commitments. And the outcome is indeed real commitment to the content of the GPS. And how are we going to set up an agile action team dedicated to make this happen? And of course, the danger is, and the challenge will be, that we want enough detail to make it concrete, but we don't need to solve it exactly in this session. And I hope that we stay on the right strategic level, at least, to discuss this. We all need to understand the urgency, the content, and the resources that are needed to make that happen. And that's why I'm committed. I'm committed to this because I believe in the process that has been underlying the development of the strategy. And I really look forward to working with you. Now, I'm going to kick off by giving the 5 leads of the GPS strategic priorities, each 2 minutes, to really give the highlights of each of these pillars. And I know, and this is going to be my challenge, I hope to be, or I might be, the most unpopular person at the end of this session, because I have a little bell. When you're in crisis, we cannot afford to speak longer than we're allotted to. And I realize that I might be very impolite, but perhaps that is a princess with a bell is a dangerous animal. When your time's up, I will ring the bell, And I hope you do excuse me beforehand. I'm really not an impolite person, but we need to work through so much content in this dialogue today that I hope you understand and appreciate that we're going to stick to that. So I'm going to be using the chat. And if you want to turn on your camera, please do so, because it really gives a feeling of we're in real dialogue, and it might help us to move forward, because we're a collection of people, 80 people around the room who can make this happen. And that is what today is all about. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Joan Lombardi, who will be talking about the first strand of the strategy. Joan, if I can give you 2 minutes to share your thoughts.
Yes, good morning, and if someone could enable my camera, that would be great. I want to emphasize the evidence in strategy 1. The evidence is clear. From neuroscience to economics, what happens in the early years matters to long-term health, development, and learning. Moreover, evaluations are continuing to inform us about what works under what conditions. Although we have more to learn, the combination of this growing evidence, the data that 250 million children are still at risk for healthy development, and the rights outlined in the Convention for the Rights of the Child call for us to act. We have put forth 3 priority strategies. First of all, we think it's very important to build the capacity to use the evidence. We have not been using the evidence to the degree that we can as it continues to grow. So we'd like to see developing new tools, including digital technology, to increase our capacity, strengthening the capacity of teacher training institutions to use data in real time, and to develop a global network of research institutions around the world to support the use of the data. Secondly, we'd like to continue to strengthen the evidence, increasing bilateral and international support for research, and creating and maintaining an international clearinghouse on what works. Third, we'd like to recruit new champions and increase their voices to move from evidence to action. This includes supporting the voices of parents and caregivers on the ground, as well as creating networks of champions in every country who can become the national voice for children working on their behalf. I want to thank the entire team that worked with me on this set of strategies. Thank you.
Fantastic, Joan. I didn't even need to use the bell. It's really wonderful. You set the stage, and I know you have tremendous knowledge, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Secondly, I'd like to give the floor to Claudia Kappa on the second strand. Claudia.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm pleased to share the results of the work on behalf of the team, which comprise Emily Vargas Baron, Ingrid Pramling, and Ingrid Engenhall. The strategy number 2 focuses on leveraging data, monitoring, evaluation for accountability. As we all know, collecting, analyzing, and disseminating data on the physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional development of young children and the services they receive is key. It's key to informing policy, addressing gaps in programs and services, and improving national ECE and ECD system at all levels, from the national level to the district and municipal level. We also know that the availability of data on early childhood care and education and early childhood development has significantly increased over the last 10 years. New tools have been developed to respond to the different data needs, including a scale for measurement, indicators, and questionnaire for use in surveys. And indeed, the availability of data has increased thanks to the inclusion of these scales, these measures, these indicators, and this questionnaire into household survey at the national level or in household survey that are managed through international programs. We also know that significant advances have been made in developing national sectorial management information systems that usually measure the availability and the access to certain services, from water and sanitation all the way to education. But despite progress, there are significant gaps that remain. certain area of early childhood education and care and early childhood development have been understudied, and there is certainly the need to strengthen the availability and quality of data, as well as the functioning of M&E systems. To respond to these specific gaps that persist, we are suggesting two strategic priorities. The first priority focuses on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals related to early childhood development and early childhood education through, of course, increasing in data availability. And the second priority is to develop national multi-sectoral early childhood education and development monitoring and evaluation systems. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to address any question you might have.
Thank you, Claudia. We'll pick up on the issues you indicate later on in the working groups. The third one will be introduced by Yoshi Kaga of UNESCO. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. So despite the compelling rationales for providing quality early childhood for all, there are still challenges across different countries. So today, half of the world's children are not in pre-primary education, and access to 0 to 3 services and early intervention is still low. Too many poor and disadvantaged children do not have access to quality ECCE. And the COVID-19 has accentuated these existing inequalities and has called into question what may be remote learning strategies appropriate for the early childhood sector. So in terms of quality, challenges include outdated or unenforced policies and regulations related to service quality standards across public and non-public services, curriculum requiring updating to address contemporary concerns, and educators lacking capacities and also conditions to practice inclusive and appropriate pedagogy and assessment and to serve parents and communities. So in view of these challenges, we propose 3 strategic priorities. One is about expanding access and tackling inequality and exclusion. So that includes strengthening policy, program planning and implementation, develop data that can inform the elaboration and financing of inclusive policies and strategies, and build resilient learning and support systems for children and families by harnessing the potential of ICT. The second relates to improving the quantity and quality of early childhood workforce. That includes actions for strengthening the workforce planning and data, and improve qualification, training, career development, and working conditions, and setting up an international observatory of effective pedagogical practices in early childhood in cooperation with different partners. The third one concerns child development and learning and quality service standards. So that would include supporting curriculum review and improving the practices for child assessment and monitoring of the child assessment and also quality standards in service of equity and inclusion. And finally, developing international references, standards, and education resources on early childhood learning and promote open education resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yoshi. We'll move to the fourth one. Christine McConnell, thank you for sharing the fourth strand.
Thank you very much. So in our group, we talked about many challenges. We know that early childhood care and education is considered to be a privilege rather than a right. And we know that significant inequalities persist both within and across nations in terms of physical and financial access to quality and inclusive early childhood services. We know that policy planning must strengthen sectoral services to enable holistic support. And we know that we need to establish better early childhood governance systems for coordination across stakeholders, sectors, and levels of government. We also know that the implementation of policies, plans, and governance has been hampered by insufficient and/or ineffective financing. There's poor data on early childhood financing, and when that data is available, we know that levels of spending are very low. For example, on average, only 2% of education budgets go to early childhood education in low-income countries. And there's an even bigger risk to these budgets being threatened due to education budgets shrinking due to the COVID-19 crisis. So our team came up with 3 strategic priorities. The first is to strengthen these normative frameworks to ensure that universal access to quality and inclusive early childhood education is at international and national levels. The second is we want to make sure that there is prioritization of at least 1 year of free and compulsory quality pre-primary education in education sector plans, budgets, and implementation. And thirdly, we'd like to significantly increase the share of domestic financing and international aid to early childhood care and education and other ECD services. So I'd like to take a moment to thank Divya Lata and Ana Nieto from UNICEF, who are my co-leads in this group, and all of our contributors to Building Block 4. Thank you.
Fantastic. And finally, thank you for all your very disciplined approach, but such rich knowledge. I'd like to give the floor to Mercedes Mayel Casaye to share the fifth strand in a manner on the strategic priorities from your group.
The strategy 5 is galvanizing coordination and international cooperation. An innovative movement must be built for young children and their families to strengthen public policies and programs at the global, regional, and national level in order to ensure inclusion, equity, and quality for all. For this, a comprehensive approach is required encompassing all actors and institutions. The comprehensiveness is based in two considerations: that harmonious development requires holistic perspectives, and that children's human rights are universal, indivisible, and interdependent. For this reason, cooperation, intersectorality, and coordination are the basis of the wide-ranging action plan, which seeks the construction of a systemic and shared vision among different actors working together for young children. To this end, it is necessary to assume some strategic priorities. The first, strengthen regulatory policies and frameworks through coordinating our governmental approaches to supporting the rights and the protection of the child. The second, strengthen multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder collaboration and coordination at the global, regional, national, and local levels. A critical pathway will be to promote to the UN General Assembly the approval of the United Nations Decade for Early Childhood Education, Care, and Development to promote coherent and strong public policies, orient financing, as well as the expansion and the improvement of services for all children and their families. It is also important to develop a global knowledge exchange platform to enable innovation, knowledge, and effective training materials. The third and the last one, strategy priority, is transform systems by strengthening capacities at all levels to plan, develop, and implement multi-sectoral programs, providing systematic technical assistance with inter-country exchange built around existing expertise of regional networks, teachers, and global technical resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mercedes. I think that this really set out a scene. I can imagine that you've been scribbling away as you were on the key aspects. Now, I'd like to, we will now do a round of very brief statements by various ministers from around the world who are here. And we're really grateful that you're taking your time to be here and to show your political commitment to this very important issue. Before I introduce the first Honorable Prime Minister of Mauritius, I would like to do and actually make use of the chat, given the fact that there's so much knowledge around the room, and give you 1 minute to answer in the chat, and the ministers are very welcome to also put your thoughts later on. You do get your 2 minutes. On the following in the chat, I just put a question in the chat: long live digital meeting opportunities. Based on what you hear about the 5 building blocks for the GPS, where do you see potential for quick wins? Very much about quick wins, and any thoughts on how to achieve them. I realize you cannot put a full knowledge in 1 minute, but just for you that we really galvanize on all the knowledge around the room. So if you can take a minute and a half to just put all your thoughts on this question in the chat, I will then go to the first minister. So anyone to really, you can type in anything you have on your mind on the quick wins today in the chat.
Can I intervene, please?
No, we will. We're now all putting our thoughts in the chat, and then I will introduce you later.
Okay.
Thank you. Typt niemand iets.
他不让我们那个。
Okay, here. Okay. Huh? Ja. I will introduce the first speaker and ministerial level, and please continue to share your thoughts in the chat, because then we really enrich the strategy as we go along. So, Honorable Vice Prime Minister of Mauritius, Leila Davis, Davy, please, the floor is yours. And again, I do apologize that after 2 minutes, I will cut you short with a little lovely bell from the Netherlands, but it's not out of disrespect, but just because we have to move on. Thank you.
So what the first thing that comes to my mind is that if we want to get things moving for the early childhood sector, we need to have commitment at the highest level. And this is something that we have learned in Mauritius, that when we have political will and the commitment of at the highest level, then things move quickly. So this is first, we need to have the political support for that. And the second point is that we need to have an institution, at least at the sub-regional level for a cluster of countries, where the early childhood sector could be guided with all research, data and all other support required, so that we can prepare our workforce, the teachers, and all the people in the early education sector. The second thing important that we feel must be done is to have this intersectoral approach, where we should have a policy, an integrated policy for the early years from 0 to 8. It tends to be fragmented in certain countries. For example, you have different institutions taking different responsibilities: health sector, early childhood and protection, and the education sector. If we have an integrated policy, the whole policy can be worked out together and proper support could be given to the early years of our children. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think that they're really good. And may I invite the Honourable Minister of Canada, Chair of the Council of Ministers, R.J. Simpson, to build upon that and share your thoughts on the particularly also that commitment at the highest political level. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. I appreciate brevity, so I won't be offended by your bell. Thank you for the presentation on the Global Partnership Strategy. It's an honor for me to be here, to be part of this dialogue on such an important priority. We agree that we must mobilize and do all we can to ensure that our youngest citizens have the best start. The strategy states that we must unite and reinvigorate partnerships for coordinated response and genuine international solidarity within and across all countries. As you know, Canada has as you may know, Canada has a decentralized system with 13 provincial and territorial ministers responsible for education. Coordination and regular sharing of practices and initiatives during these past months since the pandemic began have proven to be essential and have helped us to address the most difficult challenges in the most efficient and coordinated manner possible. We've learned that we cannot address the pandemic alone, and collaboration is of the utmost importance. For a quick win, I would suggest this is where we should all start. Only through collaboration and sharing across sectors, ministries, and governments, mobilization and accountability, and constructive and timely communication of knowledge and practices can we succeed in addressing the impacts of the pandemic and moving forward toward achieving the SDG 4 targets. The early years are indeed a critical stage for children's brain development. And this is why we need to assess how children are faring in the current circumstances and share what we have learned about children's
Les micros, ça marche pas. C'est pas nécessaire maintenant, mais oui.
We also need to look at how digital technologies are used, including access and equity issues, and the impact that these are having on children. So these are a few initial comments, and I will be happy to consult with my colleagues across the provinces and provide feedback in writing. But if there's remaining time, I would like to turn to my colleague, the Honorable Adriana Lagrange, Minister of Education of Alberta, to add her perspective. Thank you.
Perhaps we can turn to that later, and in the working groups, please share your thoughts further, and we'll go into more depth of dialogue. If I can just move on at this stage before we go to the breakout sessions. The Honorable Minister of Cambodia is not here, but I do want to highlight that the leadership of Cambodia in this effort is important. And if I may ask my UNESCO colleagues to turn off their microphones while we're listening to the thoughts of the ministers. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Minister of China, Zheng Fuji, to share your thoughts on this strategy. And from the Netherlands to China, my bell is also reaching you. Thank you very much for your 2 minutes.
各位部长、各位专家，大家好。非常高兴参加本次会议。中国政府高度重视儿童早期的发展，始终坚持学前教育公益普惠的基本方向，持续加大工作的力度。今天我想就第4主题分享中国政府的3点做法：一是国家制定规划，强力推进普及。2010年。中央政府颁布了国家中长期教育改革和发展规划纲要，确定了到2020年基本普及学前教育的目标。先后出台了2个重要的政策性文件，按照扩资源、调结构、建机制、提质量的发展思路，以县为单位实施了若干期学前教育行动计划。2是明确政府责任，部门分工协作。我们确立了国务院统一领导、地方政府履行主体责任的体制。政府呢，主要负责建设、投入、师资和监管，大力发展公办幼儿园，积极支持和规范民办幼儿园的发展。教育、财政、建设、卫生等部门根据职责分工，密切合作，共同推进。3是加大财政投入，实施重大的项目。各级政府单独列支学前教育预算，制定生均经费标准。中央财政设立专项资金，10年累计投入1500多亿元，建立了资助制度。各级政府以总计投入542亿元，资助家庭经济困难幼儿达到4700万人次。经过10年的努力，中国在园幼儿增加了1800万人，增长的比例是62%。3到5岁儿童毛日月率 从10年前的56.6%提高到现在的85%，实现了原定规划的目标。下一步，中国政府将继续加大投入，着力在提高学前教育普及普惠水平上下功夫，推动落实全球2030年议程。谢谢大家。
Thank you very much. I would like to turn the floor to Susanna Jacob, the DDG of WHO. I'm delighted you're here, and kindly turn on your camera. We look forward to hearing your 2-minute contribution on the question of how to ensure that this becomes a political priority, and where do you see especially quick wins?
Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness. My video is stopped by the host, so I can only turn on the voice, but not the video. Hopefully the host can start also to put my video right. So Your Royal Highness, Princess Laurentine, Excellencies, Stefania Giannino, ADG, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence on this issue is very clear. Early childhood development is essential in building human capital, reducing inequities, and helping children to develop resilience against the adversities. Yet many countries are struggling to put forward a comprehensive agenda that maximizes the inputs of all relevant sectors and stakeholders. The challenges are well articulated in the executive summary of this document, and we very much welcome the initiative of the Global Partnership Strategy to overcome these challenges through clarity of purpose, clarity of roles, and common goals. WHO, in collaboration with partners, developed the Nurturing Care Framework, the roadmap for action to support early childhood development, and the framework has resonated widely, and we were very pleased to see it embedded within the Global Partnership Strategy. To implement the actions, governments must be in the driving seat. The adoption of the National Early Childhood Care and Education Policy can really lead the way. But good data are indeed critical to create political will. There is indeed a paucity of comparable data on critical domains of early childhood development, such as responsive caregiving, early learning opportunities, and caregiver mental health. We must fill these data gaps, and I'm pleased to tell you that WHO in several departments are working also to make their contribution to this. Lastly, I'd like to emphasize the important role that the health sector can play in taking the agenda forward. Early childhood development starts at conception or even before. The first foundations for lifelong learning are built by families and in homes. It is the health sector that has frequent contact with caregivers and young children in the critical early years. It must play its role alongside with the other sectors. So in closing, Your Royal Highness, I commit WHO's collaboration in the implementation of the Global Partnership Strategy. Our 13th General Program of Work, which is the vision of the Director General, is focused in the 3 pillars of achieving universal health coverage, addressing emergencies, and promoting healthier populations. Together, we can do more and better, and the world's children demand it, and we have the obligation to respond to them. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to hear WHO's commitment, which is very important, especially for this multidisciplinary approach that was mentioned early on as well by Stefania and Borhan. Now, finally, before we go in the breakouts, I realize we're running a little bit over time, but so we'll have to speak even more succinctly together when we meet in our breakout groups. But it's my pleasure to introduce the Director of Program of UNICEF, Mr. Sanjay Visekera. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly, but thank you for sharing your thoughts where you see the quick wins and how do we achieve this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. colleagues, in order to move the early childhood agenda forward rapidly at country level, progress across all the building blocks need to take place in a coordinated and mutually reinforcing manner. I'll provide 3 suggestions of quick wins that could be achieved by building on initiatives which many of you and UNICEF have been part of over the last few years. Firstly, continue to support countries in their efforts to prioritize early childhood care and education in their education sector plans by including at least 1 year of quality pre-primary education in sector planning, budgeting, and implementation cycles. This also includes establishing a common vision for early childhood education among governments, donors, and partners, and shaping priorities in a complementary manner to make funding and technical assistance available where and when it is most needed. Secondly, to support these actions, we welcome country leaders, country stakeholders and partners to engage with the ECE Accelerated Toolkit, which is meant to support countries with integrating and strengthening ECE in education sector planning processes through a consultative and inclusive approach. And I'm excited to inform you that the online platform for the toolkit will be available imminently ahead of its formal launch in February. And finally, in the light of the challenges and opportunities posed by the COVID-19 crisis, we need to double down on evidence-based advocacy efforts to protect ECD and ECE investments. And these efforts are critical and timely in the current environment where countries are rethinking their education, health, social protection services as part of the response to the pandemic. Elevating the role of parents and families as they pick up the bulk of caregiving and early education tasks at home must be an integral part of the response and receive the support it deserves. Thank you, and back to you, Your Royal Highness.
Thank you so much. Again, very rich contributions. I see that several of you are adding to the chat, which is really wonderful. I pass back to you, Borhan, to introduce the working groups, the breakout sessions, which we will be leading. See you in a moment.
Merci, Princesse. Nous allons passer à...
Thank you very much. Your Royal Highness, we are going to be spending a very important moment within our meeting of today, where we are looking forward to commitment and exchanges with all partners and participants to get feedback in terms of the strategy, but also to hear what are those elements that you consider important, what are the priorities that we must define in the implementation of our strategy. We heard earlier about quick wins. What are these quick wins that we can expect? We need to have a vision as to the main programs we need to implement to achieve these objectives, and what are the contributions of each partner. This is a multi-partner, intersectorial approach, and therefore we need to hear the various contributions and proposals from ministers, from governments, and from the various agencies. It is important to our discussion, and I do hope that we will have the time to delve into these issues during the roundtable. I'll move to English now.
We'll go with the Princess Laurentine for a moderation, and another group will come with me. This will be organized automatically through Zoom. We'll have around 40 minutes. We are a bit late, but we will have around 40 minutes for our discussion, and we'll be reporting back then to the plenary. In the parallel sessions or in the breakout session, we'll discuss specifically those 2 questions that I mentioned very briefly. One, which strategic priorities and initiative will be the most relevant to achieve the objective of the strategy? And the second, what are your country's or organization priorities, and which contribution can your country make to achieve the strategy objectives? So these are the twin themes that we would like to discuss during the breakout session, and I hope that we will be reporting to the results to the plenary with the concrete results and suggestions. I'm looking at my colleagues who are dealing with the logistics. I believe that we will be automatically channeled toward the breakout session.
Yes,
can you confirm?
Yes, we confirm.
Yeah,
Okay.
just quickly, we do have a small video that the Minister of France, Education of France, wanted to share with the ministers. Just after this, ministers will be moved to the breakout sessions.
Okay, so we watch the video and then we will be moved to the breakout session. Please, if you can then show us the video.
Madame la Directrice Générale, chère Audrey.
Madam Director General, Ms. Azoulay, also Madam Giannini, ladies and gentlemen, honourable ministers, it is a great pleasure for me to speak to you today on the issue of early childhood care and education. This is a priority to France. In 2018, we had launched a symposium on the issue as fundamental for social cohesion right here at UNESCO with the French National Commission. In 2019, when we chaired the G7, I also made of this subject a crucial issue. Early schooling is crucial to our societies. Research has demonstrated that the early years are fundamental to a child's future for their personal development, cognitive development, and development overall. And this is why I decided to make schooling compulsory from the age of 3 in France to elevate our overall level, but also reduce inequalities as they go hand in hand. This shows the importance of early education in our educational system. Learning vocabulary, learning to live together, proves that it is a school for life. And we have also trained teachers for early education with regard to the specificities required. We have also over 20,000 pupils aged 5 in classes of less than 12 pupils, and we are analyzing the impact of this measure. And we're also working with other countries, such as our friends in Quebec. They have started a similar experiment with children aged 4. Education has been hard hit by the pandemic, and we must mobilize jointly from the very early age to strengthen our common efforts for early childhood. This will provide many solutions to our present and future challenges. So I welcome UNESCO's efforts to ensure awareness raising and exchange of good practices at global level. This will enable us to achieve SDG 4 access to quality education for all. I thank you very much for your attention, and I believe that our international action at a difficult time for the world, where there is a true risk of educational disaster due to lockdowns and closing of schools, at such a time we need to fight to ensure that schools remain open, to ensure our children can develop. And so meetings such as this are fundamental. Thank you all.
I believe we can move to the breakout session. Thank you for the opportunity to listen to the speech from Minister Blanquer. I hope we will have a very interactive session. And Princess Laurentine, I believe the ministers and the head of agencies that will be joining your session are in good hand. I will take care of the ones that will be joining me. And we see each other in 40 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. See you later.
Dear Princess, the 2 sessions have started, so you can start whenever you want.
Wonderful. And I do appreciate, I know it's set in the chat, but it does actually help on the proper discussion if you can turn on your cameras, because then we can really have a proper dialogue. And otherwise it's a little bit more difficult to manage an open discussion. So I would appreciate seeing you, and you can either raise your hand or put in the chat that you want to react, and I will manage between the 3 screens where everyone is. So, and I'd like to actually divide the discussion in 2 elements, because we can talk about the content of the strategy all day long. But I actually want to say, let's take 15 minutes on strategic priorities, so on the content, and I'd like to use most of the time to actually say, how are we going to move forward? How do we make sure that, I believe that this can only happen if there is an agile action team put in place, an action team that requires resources, because who else is going to be the owner of this of the strategy? We all know that all the agencies and all the governments, we all have our structures, everyone has crisis to manage. So we believe there is one action team that goes across and that works really agile. I would love to have the discussion with you about resources, how are we going to organize this so that we're going to make it happen. So really make the focus of this discussion the crisis element of it, that we start tomorrow, if we say. So after 15 minutes, I will close the discussion about the content of the strategic priorities. So who has a thought? And also I'm going to be a little bit tough on people giving long statements. Let's build on each other and do what we say we want to do, namely collaborate. And collaborate is give each other the floor. And this is not about showing how much you know, it's about building our thought process together. So who can I, on the question of the strategic priorities, is there anything that has been said for you that stands out, or that you feel has not been mentioned as an important priority? Who can I give the floor? And just raise your hand. Yes, Sheldon Schaefer.
Thank you. I just want to make a quick note. It seems to me that one of the important issues to look at even more is the impact of COVID-19 on the ECE subsector. The sector is probably the one that is most at risk because of the pandemic. And I think it would be important to move ahead quickly in terms of trying to analyze specifically with data how many ECD centers are not going to reopen, how many ECE professionals are not going to come back to the profession, how many children who should be enrolled or should have re-enrolled are not getting back into the ECD programs. I think we need data like that to be able to go to governments and say, look, this sector is highly at risk. You have to do much more about it. By the same token, I think we can come up with very useful, good lessons about how some countries have reopened ECE programs and early learning programs more successfully, perhaps, than programs for children of older ages. And I think we need better examples of how that works in the best possible ways. Thank you.
Great. So indeed, using the crisis situation to collect that data, to also instill the sense of urgency at government level. Very useful thoughts. What other thoughts about other issues, and again, things that have not been mentioned that you want to add and emphasize? Who can I give the floor? What do you feel it needs to be highlighted? I see Nathalie Vicarini. Do you have anything to add that you feel is important and not to maybe re-emphasize, but something that stands out for you?
Oui, tout à fait. En France, nous avons un enfant sur 5 qui vit sous le seuil de pauvreté. Ces écarts se sont creusés pendant cette catastrophe sanitaire et nous avons travaillé depuis 1 an en lien avec le ministre Blanquer qui vient de s'exprimer, mais aussi le ministère Solidarité Santé pour travailler dans un cadre interministériel, exactement sous l'égide de la stratégie de lutte contre la pauvreté. Nous avons évidemment testé des approches que notre association a en particulier mis en place pour lutter contre les inégalités de naissance, d'autant plus dans le cadre de cette catastrophe sanitaire, parce qu'on se rend compte que l'isolement est très important des professionnels de la petite enfance, mais aussi des parents. Le stress est monumental et les enfants sont atteints dans leur développement. On sait combien le stress est délétère pour le développement du cerveau de nos enfants et dans le cadre de leurs futurs apprentissages. Donc, nous avons mis en place une stratégie en 4 temps. Dans un premier temps, partager des connaissances en neurosciences avec lesquelles nous avons des datas solides et des études scientifiques majeures qui nous démontrent tout l'intérêt de tabler et de bénéficier de ces approches. Dans ce premier temps, nous partageons la connaissance scientifique à jour avec toute la communauté éducative. Il est question de santé sociale, il est question de messages très précis sur le développement de l'enfant que nous partageons de façon ludique, très accessible, innovante, avec les parents, les grands-parents, les professionnels de l'enfance, de l'éducation nationale, mais aussi tous les acteurs de la société civile et toutes les associations à l'échelle d'une ville, d'un département ou d'une région qui accèdent à la démarche. Ça, c'est la première étape. La deuxième, c'est de mettre en place une dynamique d'amélioration continue des pratiques. Et la troisième, c'est évidemment de mesurer l'impact. Alors, les impacts, ils sont importants. Les premiers impacts sont importants. C'est la mobilisation de tous autour de ce sujet qui devient enfin un vrai sujet de société. C'est comment ce jeune enfant est au cœur de l'évolution de notre société. On réduit le taux d'absentéisme des professionnels qui travaillent dans la protection de l'enfance, dans la petite enfance et à l'école. On réduit les violences et les maltraitances faites aux enfants. Ça veut dire qu'on a changé le regard sur l'enfant. Et il y a une vraie progression du sentiment d'appartenance à une communauté éducative apprenante, parce qu'on a partagé ce langage commun dans cette première étape. Voilà. Et évidemment, à la fin de la journée, on vient regarder si on a agi sur les inégalités de naissance.
Donc, si je comprends bien, et je vais partager, je ne vais pas tout résumer, mais si je comprends bien, vous avez vraiment, comment vous avez fait, peut-être en quelques mots, comment vous avez engagé et fait en temps de crise, vous avez maîtrisé d'en faire ce langage commun. And I'll quickly summarize.
Yes.
I won't give a long summary, but what I find interesting is, one, you immediately took it to a holistic approach. You engaged other departments and linked it to poverty and social isolation and health. Looked at the impact on the surrounding, but also on the caretakers who around the child. And finally, what I find really interesting, you managed to engage very quickly in the times of crisis, developed a shared language which allowed you to really mobilize. En quelques mots, comment vous avez fait ça, d'aller dans un temps de crise trouver ce langage commun? C'était la pauvreté? Est-ce que c'était la crise? Quelle était la façon magique?
Alors, l'introduction était la lutte contre la pauvreté. Nous avons, avant la crise, à partir de 2017, partagé ces connaissances scientifiques dans des formats très interactifs et très accessibles avec toute la communauté éducative en France. Nous avons réalisé un train de contenu petite enfance et parentalité. Nous sommes allés dans les villes, nous sommes allés vers les populations les plus en difficulté, sur les terrains les plus sensibles, les plus vulnérables. rencontrer les acteurs de la protection de l'enfance, les parents, toute la communauté éducative au cœur des villes. Et nous avons partagé ces messages très simples. Donc, les parents, les professionnels, tous ces acteurs sont venus recevoir ces messages, mais en étant acteurs du changement. C'est-à-dire qu'ils ont joué avec ces messages, ils ont vécu une expérience avec nous. Ça a duré 3 ans. Et on est arrivé au moment de cette catastrophe sanitaire où ce langage commun avait été partagé en France et en Belgique. Et on s'est donc réunis autour de ce langage commun. Et maintenant, il y a une vraie conscience de ces difficultés et que finalement, jusqu'à présent, en tout cas en France, mais dans d'autres pays également, il n'y avait pas conscience que le développement du tout petit était un vrai sujet de société.
Yeah. Okay, I will ask, thank you very much.
I can speak in English if you prefer.
C'est comme vous voulez, but for the other participants, vous avez tellement de choses à dire, donc un grand merci. Et Monsieur Blanquet est un grand ami et grand merci pour ça. So who can add to this notion of taking it into framing it? What I hear say, it's also framing it in a broader perspective of societal development, including issues like poverty, which we also know go up. Who would like to add to the thoughts shared here today? Anshu.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to go to maybe the low-income country perspective, where often we have health extension workers or agriculture extension workers. I don't know whether in the education sector there are also extension workers, but we do follow-up outreach to the homes. And I think this is maybe an area where we can have multi-sectoral collaboration, whereby extension workers who go out to the field, do house-to-house visits, etc., can include and follow up on education issues as well. Have children gone to school? Are they inscribed, etc., etc. I just wanted to kick off with the issue, and I think it's following up on what was just said, that education starts at home, and it's very important to involve the parents and the community. And so it's important, I think, also that we improve parenting skills and that we teach them and inform them about the need to stimulate child learning from day one, from the day that the child is born, actually, and that this early stimulation is going to be very important for their brain development before they actually go to preschool at the age of 3 and then primary school at the age of 5 or 6. So I think we really need to look at that trajectory, and that's why our Deputy Director General highlighted this issue, that in the first 3 years of life, it's very often the health sector that engages most with these young children and can really contribute to that learning education thing. And also that I think the extension workers really bring in that component of equity. That is one of the components in the strategy, but I think equity is going to be so important as well. We want every child to have the same learning opportunities at life, the same start at life, or the same opportunities at the start of life, and learning is such an important part of that. So I think that's also very important to see how we bring that element into it and make sure that all children can be brought into that learning environment. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I predicted, I think that these are really good highlights. And the one I would like to now turn to the second part of the discussion, because time is really going fast. And the one thing that I am struggling with in my mind, and that I'm always quite conscious of when we develop these really important and ambitious global strategies, is what is this strategy need to do that we don't have now? And I hear good practices in different countries, but what is this strategy going to add to what we don't have at the moment? And I don't mean in content, but what, for example, either in France or in low-income countries, or I don't know if Canada is still here, what is this going to add? Because that will really give us a focus of what that action team then actually needs to do. Anshu, you mentioned political commitment, but we've been talking about political commitments for years. Can we make that, and maybe make that then, how do we do that? What is missing at the moment? And make that as practical as we can, and not stay in generalities. What does this mean, political commitment? Is it that funding is committed? Is it that they understand, like Madame Di Carini mentioned, make it a conscious element of society, that they realize the importance? If we don't invest now, we're going to have a crisis in 20 years. Can we make that tangible? What are we going to do? What needs to happen to get that political commitment? And let's make it not general, but concrete steps. Is that we, for example, we don't just engage with the ministers of education, but we need to start engaging with ministers of finance, who hold the budgets. Is it that we need to create an understanding, and that when we go and talk to different ministries, they don't say, oh, go to the Minister of Education because it's not my portfolio. What is it that we need to do as a priority? Who has thoughts about that?
You have a lot of hands up. Can you see them?
No, unfortunately not. So
Natalie, if I went down the line, Natalie?
Oui, tout à fait. On a eu cette discussion à l'OCDE ensemble il y a 4 ans. On a eu cette chance en France, mais ça peut être le cas dans d'autres pays, de bénéficier d'une délégation interministérielle à la lutte contre la pauvreté. On a saisi cette occasion, je co-présidais la commission petite enfance à l'époque, et on a saisi cette occasion pour dialoguer avec le ministre Blanquer, avec la ministre qui était Agnès Buzyn, mais aussi les ministres et secrétaires d'État chargés du handicap et des finances, bien entendu. Et c'est dans ce dialogue interministériel qu'on a réussi à engager ce dialogue autour des 1000 premiers jours. Nous avons remis ce rapport avec Boris Cyrulnik il y a quelques mois, et ça présage des futures réformes en France. Et ces réformes, elles sont le fruit de cette discussion interministérielle. Et l'angle était la lutte contre la pauvreté, puisque en France, on compte un enfant sur 5 qui vit sous le seuil de pauvreté aujourd'hui,
oui,
et qui s'est encore creusé avec la crise sanitaire. Mais en effet, idéalement, un ministère de l'enfance, de la périnatalité avant la naissance jusqu'à l'école, serait extrêmement favorable à l'accompagnement de l'investissement social au plus tôt.
Now, we all know that putting interministerial committees together are difficult because budgets are stratified by ministers, so by ministries. Is this something, Anshu, you clearly put, rightly so, it needs to be a national agenda. It needs to be part of a holistic vision of the future of where a country needs to go to. But is it indeed an idea to make sure that in the strategy, we say that the interministerial, that is actually an important first step, that we find in each country a way to organize this interministerial social affairs, economic affairs, finance, education, all together. That could be then a very important first step. Stefania.
Yeah, thank you, Your Highness. Just a quick point, going back to the issue raised up by Sheldon before, which is also an idea for the quick wins. I think that in this crisis, it could be very helpful and possible, in my opinion, to collect data and building on that in order to inform better policy. And this is also related to what France is doing in terms of the methodology they implement at national level. Just to recall that UNESCO has already interesting projections. They are about the risk of dropout, which is, I mentioned a bit in my introductory remarks, but it's simply numbers we can figure out we'll have at the end of the crisis, but they're not real numbers. So we can, this agile team can do is to focus on the data component. And I think that, our team, OECD, we can build about partnership on that. In my opinion, it is a crucial time to do that.
So you're saying that indeed to collect the data, perhaps build on the good practices that we hear from France and know that other countries, collect the data and then make sure that we bring them to these interministerial platforms to then act on the data. That is indeed an important strategy.
Yes, focusing on the crisis impact. Yeah.
And do we believe that indeed it's by having the right data that we break this vicious circle of it not being a political priority? So is it by putting, I don't know if others have, and unfortunately I don't see the hands who want to speak.
Divya Lata is also from UNICEF, also has her hand raised.
Sorry?
Divya Lata also from UNICEF also has her hand raised.
Okay, perhaps if you want to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Highness. Yes, I just wanted to, emphasize the point of financing and, all the issues that we are talking about, whether it is data or, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I think to really galvanize using this platform of the global strategy to really galvanize the momentum for increasing domestic financing, as well as international aid that allocates dedicated amounts for early childhood development. UNICEF has already taken the lead in committing to allocate 10% of our education budget to pre-primary education. And I think those could be the kinds of benchmarks we want to really promote across all sectors to make sure that young children get the support they deserve. In utilizing those resources, focusing on capacitating the workforce, particularly the frontline colleagues who will be really leading the bulk of this initiative, but also to take them hand in hand with parents. I think the very important point that was made earlier in this discussion, the role parents play, and to really support them, strengthen their capabilities to be able to look at the whole life cycle approach in which as children develop through these early stages, which actually grows so rapidly and so quickly children's requirements change. So to be able to equip parents to play that role, not only in this post-COVID scenario, but ongoingly to strengthen that capacity would be very critical. I think all of that which has been said to bring about that political momentum, but I think this platform can really play a role in making that financial allocation a reality. So, and of course, incrementally build towards it, because all of our plans for data and the other programs will really depend on how resources are allocated to this subsector.
Fantastic. I've just heard that unfortunately we only have less than 4 minutes before we are zoomed back to the plenary session where we can also continue some of this discussion and give the feedback. I have two people, Adriana Lagrange to speak and Dr. Velasquez Cobiella. If you can make it short, because unfortunately the technique will zoom us back soon.
Absolutely. This is Adriana Lagrange, Minister of Education for Alberta, Canada. And so just really wanted to add to the conversation that what we're looking at in Alberta, while we do have programs for children 2 years, 8 months of age, particularly for special needs, we really want to emphasize a holistic approach, a really authentic wraparound service type delivery system where we can provide for the needs, not just of the child, but of the family as a whole, because it is so very important. And something that has been really highlighted through this pandemic is the fact that digitalization throughout the country is very sporadic, and it has really affected the delivery of our students. So thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're losing you, but we got a very important point, holistic approach, family as a whole. Dr. Velasquez, can you share your last thoughts? And then we are zoomed back to plenary.
Bueno, nos acompaña la ministra de Educación de la República de Cuba.
Minister for Education for the Republic of Cuba, and indeed, this shows the priority that we give to early childhood education. In Cuba, education is seen as a universal human right. This is something that's defended in our constitution. And there we can see the responsibility of the state with regards to providing free services in the domain of early childhood care. Now, with regards to different levels of coverage that we have, that is to say 99.2% coverage of education for the youngest children. Indeed, we have an institutional presence and also a non-institutional presence in this particular domain. Now, something else that is extremely important for us is the training of teachers. We see this as a strategic issue. We also know just how important the family is when it comes to early childhood care and education. Therefore, we try and have a real intersectoral and community-based approach to dealing with this, this domain. So we really want to make sure that we are sharing our best practices when it comes to early childhood care and education. We thank you for giving us the floor during this plenary session.
Going for the holistic approach, broad access is very important, and quality. So thank you for this contribution. And I also see in the chat a very important thought that from ILO, involving organizations of the ECCE workers and employers in this strategy. Very important dimension. We're probably zoomed back briefly, but if Oliver we have 1 minute, but if Oliver Liang wants to add to this, it's an interesting dimension that you bring into the discussion. Realizing it might be, so if you want to add to this, Abdel Jalli.
Oui, merci. Oui, merci, Votre Altesse. Je voulais juste...
Thank you, Your Highness. Just wanted to share with you a few thoughts regarding the development, early childhood development, and making sure that the implementation of this strategy will be successful. I believe that there are 3 things we need to take into account. First, we need to look at the institutional reach of this strategy. Now, without going into legal jargon, there needs to be a legal framework, such as one that we have in Morocco. We have a law, a framework law, linked to the strategic objectives in terms of early childhood development. And we also need to make sure that we have a multi-sectorial approach. Is to say, even if there is a minister who is really in charge of this issue, for example, it might be the education minister or the health minister, it needs to also be a cross-cutting issue across ministries. There needs to be this kind of participation in a more holistic global approach. And the third issue is that of governance. This is, of course, also linked imperatively to financing and making sure that there is sustainable financing. So we really believe that these are the 3 areas in which we really need to focus in order to roll out this strategy. Thank you.
Multi-sectoral approach and governance and financing are important pillars. And perhaps finally, so that I am zoomed out back in the middle of my discussion, I believe that one of the elements that I see missing in many of the strategies, I see this in the Netherlands, for example, where we forget about the importance of language development as a key element in the development of children. That is the key element, and very often strategies are developed by from a health perspective or from a poverty perspective, but that language development is a key catalytic factor for the development of children. And so I think that that integral approach means we need to really look at all development, all aspects of development of children when we put together this ministerial and multi-sectoral approach together. We will take the chats. I believe we will be zoomed back, if I understand correctly, in a minute. If anybody wants to venture and say something, realizing they may be cut short in the middle of their contribution, who would like to add a few thoughts? Oh, we're back to plenary. So I think we're going to be zoomed back in a moment.
We are back with you.
Oh, fantastic. You see?
It's us who are getting guests with you. You're hosting us.
Borhan, you were hiding and you were enjoying the rich discussion that we've just been having and the wonderful contributions that we had.
Thank you very much. It's mutual fertilization anyway. Thank you very much,
Absolutely.
Princess.
Yes.
Okay, I think we are back to the plenary and we are in your hand to guide us through the reporting. If you wish, maybe Princess, you can start with your session. You are saying that it was very rich, so maybe we can hear from you, and then I will report on our session as well. And we had also very rich discussion. Please, Princess.
No, Borhan, we're going to turn it around. I think if you start, then I follow in your footsteps. I think that is the right order. And then I really would like to close the discussion on the content and really want to focus the rest of the discussion about how then to commit, to get the commitment. How do we put this action team together so that we leave this session with the next steps? Because my fear is that we get stuck in the content, but we forget about the implementation bit. So if you can just briefly share your top line thoughts.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I must say that we had really quite rich discussion, both on content and also on implementation. And if we are starting on next Monday, what we should do, where we should start. And that was part of the question that we were trying to address. Maybe I would like to refer to 5 areas where we thought it's important to act. Some of them are still related to content, but others are really about actions and how we can move forward. The first aspect, which have been highlighted as something that probably we need to be reinforced in the strategy. They are there, but that maybe we need to give more attention to them. And these are, the first one was related to the importance of the well-being of the children and how the different system actions and stakeholders have to act toward more and better well-being of the children, learners, including, of course, in the context of the COVID and the recovery and resilience building moment. There was a second aspect that is also present in the strategy, but probably may require additional fine-tuning, is about the technology and digitalization, but broadly looking at the technology in the broader sense, from high-tech to low-tech to no-tech, and depending on the context and the needs, give opportunities and combine those different technologies to reach to the most marginalized and the most disadvantaged group, and obviously the equity and inclusion agenda has to be highlighted. The third part, which is again on content, but is also, and I'm moving from content to implementation, is about the fact that, and there is nothing new, is that the sector involves also different stakeholders, private sector, NGOs and others, and requires to be that the regulatory framework, that the quality assurance of the program are high, but that related to that, the professionalization of the workforce, how to ensure that the workforce has the right skills, has the right qualification to engage with learners, is something that is very important. And this, the group thought that while of course national authorities, national government and national stakeholders have to take into account, but this is something that is also can be considered as a global level, and that we need to act and we need to ensure that there is a mission oriented toward the educators and the teaching workforce. So this is something that we thought, and the group thought that this is important that we can take forward as action, as something that we need to look at starting from Monday morning, if we are starting. Maybe the second aspect, and it is also in the strategy, but probably we need to take it forward, is there is a suggestion that if we would like this strategy to succeed, it has to reach to the public. It has to reach to the movement of all the stakeholders and to the wider public. And in the group, we thought that the proposal regarding a decade for early child education and care is an important idea, that around this movement, around reaching out to the wider public, that will ensure also the political commitment at the highest level. Probably the decade can be the driving force and the vector around which member states can convene. Maybe the last point is, again, there was an emphasis related to knowledge sharing, knowledge building, and ensuring that the wealth of information that is existing all over the world, the researchers, the different learning that we are having, we need to ensure that this is something that can be documented and shared to all member states. And again, there is a proposal in the strategy about setting up a clearinghouse. It's important that we don't create a new thing, but that we build, and this is something that came from ECDAN, from other colleagues, that we need to build and leverage the clearinghouse or the repositories and the resources that exist around maybe an international clearinghouse that can be the force of sharing and of implementation. So we had content, but also implementation. And I hope we will, or this will echo also your discussion, Princess. Back to you.
Well, it's hard to compete with that richness, but I will just share a few highlights from the discussion that we had, which is partly overlapping and partly additional. So one very interesting comment was made that we should use the crisis situation where analyzing the data of what happened in this crisis to use also the urgency of the matter. So really do that data collecting, and we can start tomorrow of the professionals, but also how many centers have been closed. So really about that gap analysis, but use that to take it to the next step, and also to make that, secondly, the political commitment. We talked a lot about the political commitment. Very interestingly, in France, they have been already building for the last number of years a kind of a shared language, not just from a child development, but making it an interministerial approach and linking it very much to the poverty approach, the social isolation, and really broadening the framework in that perspective, which is, of course, after the COVID situation, we will all have poverty on our mind, could be a very interesting element to use it as a catalyst, let's say. We talked about, someone highlighted the specific elements for low-income countries and made sure that the equity issue really is a part of this strategy as well, and where parenting skills were mentioned in a number of the interventions shared. UNICEF, again, this is not a summary, but indicated the importance of the financing allocation at government level, but also at agency level. So the financing allocation is an important element that obviously we need to look at. Back to the content, if you wish, that the family as a whole, we should really approach this as a family as a whole, and that we that also linked to an interesting comment made by ILO to actually say, don't forget to look at the caretakers as the people working, so the workers element in it, which is an interesting approach to build that into the family approach. We then had a very interesting intervention on behalf of the Minister of Cuba of Education, who highlighted the holistic approach, broad access and quality. And then finally, we looked at legal framework, again, the multi-sectoral approach, which was really the red thread through our conversation, and as well governance and financing. So I believe that out of our discussion, the multi-ministerial, the multi-sectoral approach is important. And just to use my power of the chair, I brought in at the end that I feel that sometimes I've seen many strategies, and the importance of language development as a catalytic force for development of children, I see is often lacking. So I find that that is really a hole and a gap that we need to address in this strategy. But again, doesn't come out of the group, but it comes out of myself as one of the participants, in all transparency. So what I observed, and perhaps we can open up the discussion that Burhan and I will lead, is that we are now done with analyzing what needs to be done. We now turn the page to how are we going to get there. I hear a number of countries, and I'm really delighted that strong countries, Cuba, China is here, Canada, France, other countries are here. But how are we going to make sure that the entire international community will be behind that? And how can you, and perhaps I look to Mr. Simpson and to others, how are you going to use your voice to get others to make sure that others use this as a political commitment as well? What are we going to do in order to build that action team? Any thoughts about that? And Burhan, if you see people raising their hands, I can't see them. So perhaps you and I can do the tandem that we are always enjoying. Who would like to give first thoughts about how to make sure that very quickly we galvanize the support that we need in order to build that action team to help implement the strategy?
I see Mercedes who wants to speak. Maybe we can give the floor to Mercedes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I will like to remember you our proposal about the approval of the decade of early childhood education, care and development in order to strengthen governments in the definition and implementation of comprehensive and effective public policies to ensure development, care, and the realization of young children's citizenship. Proclaiming the decade will help to coordinate, to boost public policies, including democracy, including the consideration and the participation of young children, of families, of actors, of educational sector, health sector, welfare systems, and of course to develop framework and mechanisms to allow the construction of regional, local, and national strategies and programs to create a comprehensive early childhood protection policies and systems. Thank you very much.
Okay, my one question that I have, I think this is an excellent idea, and I'd like people to comment on it without us having to, just as an open question, does the word decade have enough of the urgency in it? Or because that's what we did before COVID, and is there a way to build momentum with the sense of urgency attached to it?
Princess, I see Minister Elsa Velasquez from Cuba asking for the floor. We can give her the floor, and maybe we can start the response to your point through her intervention.
Yes.
Please.
Minister from Cuba, thank you.
Buenos días, gracias. Buenos días.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the floor. Now, we do agree that this is a high priority issue for all countries around the world. And following your proposal, I would like to say more about the potential contribution of Cuba with our main resource, which has been in development since the revolution triumphed, and that is human resources. We make that available to all countries who so request, with technical assistance and cooperation to develop the educational program that we have developed in several countries around the world in many contexts to grant all attention required to the children who need it. We facilitate access to document, television programs that show how a family can educate children at home. And this is an experience that we've applied in Cuba, and in particular during this pandemic, where we have not left aside our young children. We have a whole television programs to provide assistance to the families, to provide continuity with what was said and done in schools. And we also continue to train teachers within our universities and other institutions. We train all staff required, teachers and other staff around early childhood. We also carry out diagnosis and evaluation activities for children with special needs. We also provide assistance to carers and teachers, educators. We develop materials that are specialized and also games that we put in the hands of the families and the communities to ensure that we have a multidisciplinary approach to provide support for our young children. Finally, I would also like to reiterate everything that concerns the development of language, and I completely agree with what has been said. We are developing an improvement of our educational system, and throughout that improvement, we have included early childhood, and we've defined 5 dimensions to develop this whole process of improvement. One of them precisely has to do with communication, and this of course involves the development of language. So again, this is an issue that we've paid great attention to and has full priority in our action towards early childhood in Cuba. So we fully support what has been said here and all of your preliminary conclusions. We believe that these are important aspects to develop and to have full political support and attention for early childhood, because early childhood is our future for any country and requires our full attention and full priority. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. And I think we have a strong statement of commitment. I won't go into all the details that you mentioned, but we have a strong statement of commitment. And the question is, again, in the few minutes, I think we close in 15 minutes. And Borjan, perhaps you can, for the process, what is it that you need from this group in order to move forward and have the guidance that you need?
Thank you very much, Princess. Yeah. And I would like to, I mean, of course, we have the strategy, but maybe there are 3 things that are coming very clearly from our discussion that we can run with them starting from Monday. One is this idea of advancing a decade and advancing what Honorable Minister Simpson mentioned as a movement of the public, and how to ensure that there is a wider public engagement with it. And I think this is something that obviously we can start thinking about and getting it through. The second aspect that came is about this idea of a clearinghouse and resources. We have already several pieces, but they are fragmented. They are not interconnected, not working in the network. And I think that's an effort. We are in a platform economy, and it's about coming over the top and getting all these coming together so that we have a strong clearinghouse. And the third is something that we didn't discuss, but I think is very important. It was also in the Minister Blanquer point, about the legal framework and the importance of an international framework for early child care and education. We are lacking an international instrument and tools, and this is something that obviously we can advance. Now, how we can move forward in terms of the next steps, Madame Giannini will give some final points, but I would like to highlight 3 actions that we'll be taking based on our discussion today. One is finalizing the strategy and fine-tuning the different elements, and Emily and other colleagues are here and have been listening very carefully. I think that there is a broad endorsement of the strategy, is more fine-tuning and checking some element, and then sharing that with all member states, with the different stakeholders, and getting this endorsement. The second is the implementation modalities, and this is a work that probably will require further discussion. I think that the idea of having an agile team that will be driving the strategy is rather accepted. The question is, of course, to ensure that there is a contribution from the different stakeholders, that we don't get to the old scenario where one agency is leading and then all the others disappear, or one country is leading and all the others disappear. The idea is to continue this collaboration and having an implementation arrangement that will be, of course, acceptable and accepted to all. And third, of course, we need the means, the resources that can help us advancing. And this is something that there is part that is related to country plans and country resources, domestic and international resources, but we need also some catalytic funds to ensure that the strategy get deployed, that we have the means to ensure this campaign, the work for the decade, the work on the clearinghouse. So that's something that probably we need to fine tune as we move forward, and we will be working on that starting from Monday morning. Thank you very much.
Great. So perhaps I will just say a few words and then pass it back to Stefania to close the gathering. I believe that indeed having the right process, I've seen several of these, and I'm sure that we all have that, if we're honest, that indeed the 3 points that Borhan mentioned are the preconditions for success. And I believe that if we don't pull all of them together and go down to the detail of indeed organizing that action team, we're at risk of falling back into old habits. And I think that that is indeed what makes this process different, which is why the way it was designed by UNESCO and Stefania in the lead with Borhan and his team really doing such a wonderful job. And this is actually, for me, the only reason why I'm committed to this process, because I believe in the process. But I feel that this is now the next stage, and I'm really happy that you say that on Monday you will start picking that up with the different member states, which is perhaps not a discussion that we should have here, but that is the follow-up. But because if there's not the resources to build that action team and to do the actions that were mentioned in the strategy, it will not happen. And I think that the idea of having a label, I think what was really interesting in your discussion is the fact that you not just leave it at the political level, but that you create, you put it to the public and really make it a national awareness campaign, if you wish, about the importance of investing in the young people now so that we don't have a crisis in 20 years' time. France also mentioned that this is really important, has been important of building on that. So I think that those access of the public political commitments to a holistic approach is really what has been coming out of this discussion. So I don't know if I should give anyone else the floor. We have a few minutes, but perhaps I'd like to really invite you to put in the chat while it's still open in the next few minutes, your thoughts, your additional thoughts of possibilities of making this happen, and then pass the floor back to Stefania to close this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Your Highness, and thank you all of you, ministers and colleagues. Well, I have a lot of notes. I think it was a really not, how can I say, academic discussion. I'm a university professor, so I love very much academic discussion, but this meeting was about really taking action and taking, building on something which is already going on, but it's not about starting from scratch, but it's about finalizing a process. I take in the words that Borrell mentioned, they are not, putting on the table by chance. We want to use a mission-oriented approach. That means to have a clear mind about next steps, to quantify, to take the leadership in coordination, but it's not UNESCO initiative, it's UNESCO, putting together, let me say, under the global coalition leadership, because the global coalition as already something we have working very well. We take this initiative because of the COVID-19. And I think that the idea, Princess Laurentine, that in our room, some colleagues mentioned to start from a data collection. I also joined this idea of the crisis and the impact of the crisis on ECCE. And it's a good starting point to mobilize awareness, advocacy, and also reaching the political will that, by the way, we heard in this room. We have some countries that already, committed themselves strongly to some actions. So to go concretely to next steps, let me summarize a bit how I see the picture and proposing some next steps. I mean, we hear to this hand high level of political will, leading to sufficient resources to the sector. I think it's critical to quantify what really the community needs. I see in the chat, France, for instance, already invested some 100 million, right, to the strategy at national level. So it's important to see our target, what is our target and which are the resources we need. Second component, second dimension I heard, integrated, well-coordinated, multi-sectoral approach to ECCE policy and planning. And I think that this is something that we can put in the fine-tuning exercise within the strategy, to be very clear that it's not about education or health or labor responsibility, but it's about using this holistic approach. And then the third part, which is a critical one for us, focusing on equity. And I think that this is a bit looking at the most marginalized children, and this is something that we can really translate into concrete proposals. How can we reach the most marginalized, and what does it mean? Language development, if I may, I wish to join your proposal, Your Highness, because I think that language development is one of the critical dimensions of development as a whole, cognitive development. And I think that this could be a concrete proposal we can put into the strategy. Then I go back to the 3 points that Boren has already presented and summarized. Finalizing the strategy, this is a job that we can coordinate and help with the help of our partners, for sure, in the coming days. Establishing the Agile team. My idea and my proposal is that this Agile team will not be hosted by UNESCO exclusively, but it could be a kind of mobile Agile team being hosted by different partners which already committed themselves. So OECD, ILO, WHO, according to the different side of the strategy we want to develop.
And then resources, I said from the beginning, and this is my last point, it's not about asking for something different from the huge campaign for education that you already launched last year. It's about focusing on this part of the campaign. And I think this is a very important next step. I mean, there will be, for instance, in July, the GP replenishment. As you know, GP strategy is about basic learning and education. ECCE is part of the Global Partnership for Education strategy. So it's about giving to them data, evidence, and quantifying the part which is related to ECCE development in the coming months. So I see this as a process which is still within the COVID response, but looking forward beyond and becoming in the SDG 4 acceleration action plan, a very important pillar. So I thank you, all of you, very much, starting from you, Princess Laurentine, for your commitment and, also strategic thinking with us, because I think this is an important component of the work we are doing today. Thank you very much, and see you. So we keep in touch starting from Monday next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. Adiós, ministra. Muchísimas gracias. Bye, Minister Simpson, and all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.